Yeah. And this is where I'm not like the expert. I'm not the neurologist, but I can tell you that like with this broad neurodivergence, but a lot of it does have to do with how information is taken in and processed. There's not a consistent way that happens.
Mm,
There's not a template for everyone with autism or everyone with ADHD. Um, but because you'll get these people who are able to hyper focus in on certain things, on subject areas of interest, for example. Um, and that's where you get that kind of classic, like special deep knowledge interests, uh,
mm,
is one of the things associated with it. But then it's very, very difficult to switch focus often or to switch to things and try and focus on things that are not intrinsically interesting. Um, And so, overstimulated, understimulated is a constant battle, right?
mm,
Where some people are more sensitive to noise, or they are very, very sensitive to texture and touch. These are common ones, and so like just the act of having to wear anything that's not their preferred outfit, something soft. Like everyone has their sort of preferred way of dressing. Uh, But if parents force their kids to dress, like, appropriately,
mm,
and don't understand why they're having fits about wearing a skirt or wearing a sweater, because if you're neurotypical, you don't understand, that feels like an assault, right? It's like, you know, being stabbed with needles, right? The sensations are more intense, so that can be, sensory.
mhm.
It can be visual sensitive to like a lot of noise, a lot going on in the visual field, flickering lights, neurotypical brains are really good at filtering out most of what goes on. We filter out most of what goes on. Um, and and then we can focus in on certain things. And what we love to focus in on um, are social interactions. Right?
Mm,
Um, And so neuroatypical brains don't filter,
hmm,
meaning don't filter the same, right? And they don't filter nearly as much, meaning that, while also trying to hold this conversation, the AC kicked on in my space. You might have heard a little
mhm,
noise going on in
mhm,
the background, but you and I probably just ignored it. That could be an overwhelming, distracting noise, no longer able to have this conversation because of what happened in the environment.
mm,
Because I'm distracted by that, or I'm distracted by this noise, or I'm distracted by, you know, an internal state, or I'm distracted by someone being in a bad mood next to me. It's really
mhm,
hard to filter that stuff out. Uh,
mhm. How much of that is fixed? Because, when I got, very into meditation, like, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a little too into it, um, but, I noticed that in training your attention, kinda going through those exercises, my ability to focus and not be distracted by things did seem to be flexible. I'm wondering if, for the clients who you work with, is that something where because it's sort of part of who they are, there's not a lot of flexibility, or, is that something that you can work with them on if they wanna
yeah.
change?
The brain will filter differently than it does.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and yet attention, right, is a different thing.
Mhm.
Attention is a
Mm.
conscious
Mm.
process.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I definitely meditate with these clients. Um, and most find it helpful, right?
Mhm.
Some aren't willing to, but most are willing to, and most find it helpful to some degree. Um, and that works better with guided meditation on your own. And so that can train and build attention and that ability to direct it, but it
Mhm.
won't change filtering. So you're
Right.
still getting an overload of information uh, in most settings,
Mhm.
which is actually, and sort of jumping ahead a little bit to this idea of how online spaces can be really helpful.
Hmm.
When you're communicating with someone online, you're removing so much of that extraneous information, or, things that would be very distracting. And so,
Yeah.
in some ways, it can become much easier to communicate. There still may be subtext lost, um,
Right.
but online relationships can feel easier and more satisfying, and like they can understand people better because they're able to take time, express themselves, and not get distracted by that weird look that crossed someone's face, um,
Hmm.
and not get distracted by all the millions of things going on around them in the conversation.